Should you tip your waiter? Should you spank your kids? Should we change the minimum wage or should it stay the same? Is organic food real or is it actually a scam? Sour topics from a sour guy. These are the Lemons with Clemens.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the show. This is Evan with the Lemons with Clemens. There's so many different things happening right now, and I am in love with it. I am enjoying it. I'm enjoying the music in the background. I am just beside myself right now. I'm super excited. Okay, today's lemon. All right, today's lemon is: should you spank your kids? Now, this is something that there's so many different schools of thoughts, and there's so many things behind it. Okay, so let's first of all talk about what's going on with today. Okay, I feel like personally, all right, and obviously this isn't gonna be about how it actually is with everything going on in life. Okay, but I feel like where we are now, okay, with children is completely different than where it was when I was growing up. When you were growing up, you can't tell me that it's the exact same. It's not. And it's the same thing if you are older or younger. It's always different. So that's one thing we have to understand. It's always changing. It's always changing. It's always changing. And that's fine. Okay, that's fine. But what's not fine is where it becomes a problem, because things are changing, in my opinion, in not a good way. So what is it? What is different? Okay, is it the internet? Is it how, and I think one thing that like YouTube does a really good job at, here's a good example is my son growing up. He doesn't know what the hell commercials are. We've had Netflix for the longest time, or Hulu, and if you pay the extra money, you get it, without any ads, Hulu or Prime Video or whatever it could be. There's so many different things now where you basically have a video with no commercials. So whenever my son first saw commercials, he didn't know what to do with himself. He was like, what is this? It's like, I want to go back to watching my Minecraft videos or whatever it might be, and that was whenever it was on YouTube. And YouTube has those little commercials that you can skip after just a few seconds, or, and they do a good job because it's only just a couple minute videos. Now, one thing I've noticed, though, is that, today's generation is different, all right? What is different is the fact that I think there's a lack of respect or common courtesy. I think we're so worried about toxic masculinity that we don't teach behaviors, to boys especially, on how to be a man. Okay, and there's a lot of things that go to being a man, I think, that go far beyond the fundamentals of what we know today. I think there's a lot more than, just men and women or whatever. I think there is a right way to do things and a wrong way to do things. And I don't think I'm wrong for thinking that either. Pardon me. I think that it's important for us to have roles in life, okay, so that we can know what we're doing and know what to do with ourselves and know how to treat each other. It's hard to know how to treat somebody, okay, if you don't know what they are, and it's even harder to treat somebody if they haven't been raised correctly. People don't even hold the door open for each other anymore. What happened to that? Every time I hold in, and that's something that I was instilled in me, it's just the right thing to do. And so for some reason, I hold the door open for somebody and they're like, thank you so much. And that's something that needs to be instilled to our children, to do the right thing. Your grandmother's getting into the car, open the door for her. Help her in and out. The respect for elders, respect for authority figures, and respect for one another, as well as common courtesy. All that stuff is going away, and I'm worried about it. Okay, so where we're going today is I feel like a little bit different. It's taken a turn compared to whenever I was growing up or when you were growing up. And I think it's, I don't know. A lot of it is, I think, discipline. I think it's this new wave of how we think we should be teaching children. One of my previous podcasts, I'm talking about what's going on in the schools and all this weird stuff is showing up in schools of teaching children. I think the big idea behind LGBTQ and the trans movement makes it very different because I guess I should specify those movements, all right, are not a bad thing. Okay. I think there's a lot of stuff being pushed onto children that already don't know themselves. I don't think you can tell a child as they're growing up, you can be whatever you want. You can be a boy, you can be a girl. It's just whatever you feel. I think we're pushing a narrative onto children that shouldn't be there. I think all mammalian species are either male or female because it's made as science to replicate. That's how we're built. That's evolution. Okay? I understand sex and gender is different. This is something I'm still learning about. I'm going to be wrong, and you're going to be pissed off about a lot of it. Okay? But even if the idea behind gender and sex is different, okay, you can't teach a child that you can be whatever you want, or you can't force upon them whatever. And I understand the idea behind it where you say, you can't force a child to be a boy, okay? But I think they show signs at a certain type. I've always heard the stories of parents of children that end up homosexual and be like, well, I knew since he was a kid, however he did things. Look, my mom painted my fucking fingernails. All right, when I was a little kid, and you know what? That was a bonding experience. We didn't paint them a different color. It was clear nail polish. And you know what? I loved it. I loved the feeling of the nail polish on my fingers. I thought it felt really neat because it was a cool sensation. And that was it. But it was a bonding experience for my mom and I. And I moved on with my life. I got older. It was just an experience. I think she always wanted a girl. She had 2 boys. All right. And I was the one that said, okay, sure. And so, fun fact about me. All right. But I don't think that you can necessarily hold the idea of being a boy or a girl from a child. Okay. That's the first thing. All right. I think they need to start developing an identity and growing into it, because I don't know if you all remember growing up in, primary and middle school, elementary school. It's pretty brutal if you don't know who you are. When you're in the process of still finding yourself, you're the one that gets made fun of, and it becomes difficult, and then you become very, depressed. Whereas the people that always knew themselves, either the jocks or the cool girls or whatever it is, there's always those cliques that are always there. They always knew themselves. They always know what the hell's going on, and they know themselves enough of what they want to be or what they're going to be. And I think it's because their parents instilled it instead of saying, be whatever you want, because nobody knows. Hell, I'm, 30 years old and I still don't know what I want. I don't know myself. And every year I'm still learning more about myself and more what I can do. So I think it's unfair to tell a child to decide for themselves, especially before puberty or before they have the idea to think. All right. And I know I'm going in a weird direction here, but it all makes sense, because where we're at as a society is changing rapidly. And if we don't get a hold of it, we're going to lose our future. All right. Our children are our future. It's our livelihood. Hell, that's hopefully my retirement plan. You know what I mean? It should be my retirement plan. I should be ready for my kid to wipe my ass when I'm 80 some odd years old and I'm going to enjoy it because I wiped his ass many a times, okay? What I worry, though, is that we're in this weird thing of discipline becomes abuse, or telling a child that there's something different, or not calling them by the right pronoun, it becomes abuse. And don't get me wrong, there's cases about this. If you don't think that it's that's a real thing, you're wrong. Okay, if you look at California and Texas, there's been a lot of debate and a lot of issues going on. You know, there was a Texas man that had a child that he thought should be his boy, and the mother was trying to raise it as a woman, and it went through courts. It was a whole ordeal. And that's scary, because that's even more confusing for a child that's going through things. You know, and I think children don't know what they want. They're sponges, first of all, and they will take in any information, okay? Now, let's use that to go into the next segment here, okay? So children are sponges. Right? They take in everything. And that's where discipline is very important. Should you spank your children? This has been a debate that I've seen over the years start to become more and more focused on the fact that a lot of people say, no, you should never hit physically on your child. All right, they never talk about the psychological or emotional abuse that could possibly be happening, okay? And that's something that could also be attributed to the, movements of trans people of not knowing genders and whatnot. That could be considered an abuse, in my opinion, mentally or emotionally, because you're confusing a child and don't know what they're doing. Okay, but you should never hit the kid. Say whatever the hell you want, never hit it though. All right, I think you get a lot further with words over time. I think abuse does change things, okay? But I think there's a huge distinction between abuse and discipline. I think there's kids that are abused, and my heart is full for them. That's awful. I hate the fact that there are children that are just beaten. All right. And you hear stories and you see videos of it, and it just breaks your heart. That shouldn't happen. What I worry about, though, is we're so scared of being abusive that we will not discipline the children. And now children run, I feel like, amok. They just run all over the place. They do whatever they want. You don't want to tell them no. And what I can't figure out, though, is where the line is. What is the line? And who decides that line? Before my time, even, corporal punishment was a very serious thing where schools were allowed to paddle children. All right, if a kid was acting out, they got to paddle them, and a lot of people signed off on it, and it became a little more. From what I understand, is that it became more prevalent in a Catholic school or a private school or a boarding school. Okay, but I don't understand where the problem is if it's done the right way. What I can't understand is that it's not your child. So anything of that type of nature, all right, you should be the one in charge of it. I get that. I agree with that, actually. But to say that you can't spank your child, I think is wrong. I think you should be absolutely able to spank your child. I think it's necessary in some aspects. Now, let's remember, every child is different. Every child's different. Anybody that's had multiple children knows this. One baby is just perfect. The other baby kept them up all night. One baby was easy to deal with. The other one drove them crazy. That's just how parenting works. We all know it. All right. I've only heard stories. I've heard great stories and I've heard horror stories. I have a baby with colic. You want to beat the shit out of him, but you won't because it's a baby with colic. All right. There's been times where my kid was crying so much and I didn't know what he wanted. I was like, oh my God. I didn't know what to do. I didn't hit him by any means, but it drove me crazy. I didn't know what to do. I could understand if somebody broke and did something wrong. It doesn't mean it's right. I can understand it because I was on the brink of pulling my hair out. Okay. And I'm not saying that's the right thing to do. That's awful. Shouldn't, especially if it's a baby. Don't fucking hit a baby by any means. But I can understand how somebody with a weak mind could try to do that. Now, as a baby gets older, okay, and you become a toddler era, I think the toddler era is the time whenever you need to start making boundaries. And that's what discipline is about. Discipline is about boundaries. All right, it's the same thing. And, people might hate this, okay? And guess what? That's what I do. I do stuff that you hate. All right, but people might hate the idea that you have to treat a child like a dog in a sense. To make a dog trained well, you have to make a routine and you have to set boundaries. Boundaries are incredibly important for all things. You have to understand what's right and what's wrong, what you can do and what you can't do, where you can go and where you can't go. But if you don't set those boundaries and you let them do whatever because you're tired, then that's when it becomes hard. Okay? So, if you have a child, all right, and here's where it gets a little different, all right? I think spanking should happen within a certain age. It shouldn't happen when it's a baby, and it shouldn't happen, you don't spank a child that's 7 years old. So what is that? Between 3 and 6? And I think those are important times for a child. That's where they're learning and becoming that sponge. They understand, they can speak a little bit more. They know what you're saying. They know what you want. They understand their feelings. And that's the time that they're developing into their own person. That's also the time you need to start whipping them into shape in a sense. Okay. There's nothing wrong with a swat in the butt. And here's one thing. All right. You look at all the ideas of people saying, my parents spanked me and I turned out fine. Look at me. Does anybody else realize that anybody that says that on like Facebook or something, they end up being the worst people? Has anybody noticed that? And that's what worries me the most about this entire segment that I'm doing right now. Okay. The fact that all the people that say, I turned out fine, are the people that are not fine by any means. They're not the people that you say that's the example of what I want my child to be. And I don't know if that's just me, but it just seems like a very common thing. All right. We're not fine. I'm not fine. I got spanked a handful of times. I didn't get spanked enough, honestly. I probably should have been spanked more because I was awful as a kid in a lot of ways. Should have got spanked a lot more, but I'm still not fine. And it's not from spanking or not spanking, all right? I know a lot of people that were spanked and they were not fine, all right? And there's different levels of spanking, okay? Think of the old school of the grandmothers say they give me my switch. You don't know what that is? You don't know what a switch is? Give me a break. Okay. The switch is when the grandmother, and this is the older generation, it had almost a stick type thing, and usually skinnier, because the skinnier it was, the more it wilted. All right. The thicker it was, it would bruise. And sometimes they would go say, pick a switch. So you'd have to go and find a twig or a branch outside for them to beat you with. Okay. So if they'd say, go find me or go get me a switch, that meant you were going into the brush, finding a stick of some sort, and you had to decide how thick you wanted that stick to be when you brought it back. And the entire time you knew you were about to get your ass whooped if someone said that to you. Maybe the first time you didn't know what it meant, okay? But It turned out if you got the skinnier one, you think you'd get away from pain. No, that just stung more and got you to welt more. Whereas if you're like, once that didn't work, you get the thicker one. Then you realize the thicker one just hurt more and bruised you more. So you had to find this weird medium, mid-range one that hurt no matter what, okay? Or you had the parent, usually, most honestly, the dad, okay, get the belt. Now, the belt is a clear sign of I fucked up. All right, the belt, that's what the belt does to you. As soon as you hear that belt come out of the pants, or when you take it and just smack it, between your hands, you knew it was game time. You knew you're about to be sore. All right, so there was a lot of different ways of doing it. Now the belt becomes a little bit to the idea of too much, and I think it depends on the punishment. I'm not against a belt if it meant that the child was completely out of line where you think even a spank doesn't work. Now, all right, I should preface this, okay? I'm going into the ideas of all the different abilities to discipline / abuse your child, okay? But what I'm not talking about is, when do you do that? All right, in my opinion, okay, you should start by telling them what's wrong or doing a timeout or doing all this other stuff. This is never, any of the stuff that I'm talking about is never the first thing you do. It's never the first thing you do. It should always be, if not the last resort, it should be close to the last resort, okay? I think you're in a wrong mindset if the first thing you do is spank or beat your kid. Have you tried timeouts? Have you tried having a conversation? And that's the thing, is that kids are a lot more intelligent than we give them credit for. Like, I talked to my kid like he was an adult the entire time. I never did the baby voice. I never did any of that. And talked to him. I said, this is what's wrong. This is what you're doing wrong. You're doing it wrong. And it worked well because I think children want to be included in a lot of ways. And that's part of it, is being included. But I think also children just will push the limits. That's what they're doing. The idea of a child just doing whatever they want is wrong, because they'll never know what is right and wrong. All right, they will constantly push and push because they have to find out what they can and can't do. And that's part of human nature, all right? If you watch a dog with its pups, a dog will do the same thing. It'll growl and bark at its own children, all right, to keep them in line, just as parents should do. Except we do it a little bit different. Hell, even the mom dog will bite at their pups, which would be close to spanking. All right. Now, there's only been a handful of times that I've seriously spanked my child. All right. And I'm going to tell you about them and explain why that is. All right. I think spanking is for whenever something is serious, or if a timeout or a conversation didn't work. All right. You have to set the boundary. You have to set the line. And you put that line in the sand. And if they cross it after you've already set that boundary, you have to show them how serious you are. Because once you do that, they're not going to do it again. They're young enough at that point that they're not going to do it again. They know better. If you wait until they're older to set those boundaries, they're like, oh, that wasn't so bad. I'll push that boundary. Or they'll want to push that boundary. You have to set the boundary. And you have to realize that, yes, these are children, but at the end of the day, when you're raising a child, you're raising an adult. This is a person. All right, you have to understand that they're going to have values. They're going to have, morality, and you have to instill that into them. So they have to know what's right and wrong. So sometimes that does mean you have to get physical, because that's part of being, with lack of a better term, the alpha. All right. And that's why the dad is usually the one that disciplines, because the dad is most of the time the alpha in the household. All right. And in the single households, of course, the mother is the alpha at that point. And there's a lot of mothers that are alphas, but there's, again, a fine line between abuse and discipline. So you'd go to spank the child, doesn't work. Next step, I'd say, is the belt. You have all the other options, okay? And before you go to spanking, obviously you've talked to them, or you've taken away things that they like, or you've done different things that should have negated whatever action or reaction that they've had. If it's a Tyler that likes electronics, you take away electronics, or you ground them, or you put them in timeout. And that doesn't work for some kids. All right. And again, every child is different. You have to treat them all differently. Some are great and some are awful. But you need to be comfortable with the fact that you have to set the boundary. So, child acts up, you spank them. That doesn't work, use the belt. If you have to do it multiple times, then there's a bigger issue and you should not continue. And that's when you should get counseling to figure out a better route. Is it the routine that you're doing? Is it something else going on that you didn't find a conversation with? I think if you have to spank a child daily, there's a bigger issue. I think if you use a belt daily, there's a huge issue. Okay? Again, there's a fine line between abuse and discipline. I don't think that the schools should punish your child like that. That's not their right. All right? But sometimes maybe they're better than some of the parents out there. Honestly. I want to be clear. And the stories that I'm about to tell you are true stories. Okay? My son is fine. He's a great kid. He's intelligent. And the problem is he's too intelligent. All right. He knows what ticks people off. I've spanked my child. My son's mother has spanked our child. And a lot of times, there's times because sometimes you get honoring and it doesn't work. So you do other things and you have to hit them where it hurts. Take away electronics or take away TV or, make them listen to awful music. I don't know what it is. All right. One day, I told my son that he couldn't do something or we couldn't watch something. So he storms into his bedroom and slams the door. Now, this is where parenting becomes different, okay? Again, parenting is about setting boundaries and setting up examples for how you live in life, okay? One thing that I know is that if I am the head of the household, you do not slam a door in my house. I pay for this house. I make it. Slamming the door is your way of disrespecting the person that runs that house or whoever told you wrong without actually saying anything. It's a way of cowardice. Okay? Yeah, I think if you slam a door at somebody, it's cowardice because you're releasing anger that you're unable to say for yourself. So that door slams. He goes into his room and slams that door so quick. I cannot tell you how quick I got up out of my chair and stormed into his room, and he knew he messed up as soon as I was in his room. He was laying on his bed, and I turned him around, and I whooped his ass multiple times. I admit it. I did it. I whooped his ass. He cried. I shut the door. I didn't slam it. I shut the door and let him cry. I go in there a little bit later because he didn't want to come out. And I said, do you know why that upset me so much? Do you know why you got spanked? Well, of course, at that point, no. Because you're mean and blah, blah, blah. No, because you slammed the door in my house. You're not showing respect and you're acting however you should or however you want. That's not how it works. You have to contain. You have to control yourself. And that's the other part of slamming a door is a lot of people do that type of stuff out of anger because they have a lack of control. You have to teach control to a child. Okay. The other time that, what I did is probably potentially abusive. Right. And this is where, I've only spanked my child only a handful of times. Okay. Probably needs more because he's ornery as hell. I don't know where he gets it from. Probably his mother. There's one other time that, we go to a movie. He wanted to see this movie. I had already paid for the tickets. I was super excited because it was a movie we get to watch together. It wasn't our first movie by any means, but, my father always took me out to go see a movie. So for some reason, I feel like I should always take my child out to a movie to enjoy it with them. It's something different. So we go and I pay for the tickets and I'm going to get, we get our popcorn and whatnot. He wants to play the little arcade games before we go in. Well, no, we're not going to do that. Movie starts in just a few minutes. I'm not doing it. And granted, I probably took him to the movie theater when he was a little too young. Okay, I don't think it was our first time going. But, I want to say he was only 4 or 5. He's probably 5. Not even 5. But he was at that age where he still couldn't control his emotions very well. He didn't know how to express how he felt. Okay, and that's the other thing. You have to teach a child how it's okay to express your emotions. All right, it's okay to talk. It's okay to be mad or sad. It's okay to be happy. It's okay to be angry. But you also want to be okay with expressing those emotions and trying to explain them and understand why. And that's part of having that conversation. And I think that becomes the hard part of parenting is people don't understand that they don't know how to express themselves because it's like a puppy doesn't know how to express itself. All right. And I keep comparing children to puppies, but it's so serious. It's so real. You need to be able to teach an animal how to tell you what it wants. It's the same thing with a child. I'm sorry I'm coughing so much. I don't know if it's a dry throat or corona. Who knows? Anyway, so we're at the movie theater and this whole ordeal happens. And what do? First thing I do is tell them, you know what? You do not deserve to see this movie. I've already paid for the movie. I've already paid for popcorn. And I already paid for my box of Bunch Crunch. And if you didn't know, you take a box of Bunch Crunch and mix it in every now and then when you take a bite of popcorn. Mix it in. It's the best combination ever. Okay? Bunch Crunch and popcorn. I promise you, try it next time you go to a movie. Or hell, even if you don't go to a movie, try it at home. Okay? The best way to go about it. Anyway, so I have all the stuff already bought. He wants to play the arcade games. I tell him no. He starts crying and yelling and making a big ordeal. That doesn't work for me. First of all, I don't know about anybody else that's ever been a parent. Whenever their child is making a scene in public, I get like hot. I'm like, oh God, because I'm kind of embarrassed. I'm the parent with a child not acting right. I'm embarrassed at this point, right? And I want to look like I'm an okay parent, and maybe that's part of the social dilemma of when you're in public. A lot of times, when my child's in public, his mom would be like, I'll take you to the bathroom, or I'll take you outside. Because nowadays you can't spank a child in public, even if they're acting out. So as soon as, the child hears that, or our, our son especially, would say, you want me to take you to the bathroom or take you outside? And he knows exactly what's being said. Like, I'm not kidding. All right, there's a boundary, and it shouldn't be that, and I shouldn't have to threaten that, okay? But, I get hot, I'm embarrassed, I'm like, oh God, people are going to be paying attention now. So, it's game time, decision time. Kid's acting out, about to go to a movie. Can't reward them now. Can't reward them. You know what? We're not watching this movie. We're leaving. We're getting the hell out of here. What? No. Oh, my God. My child is just screaming even more and whatnot. Get out. We're leaving right now. Walk to the car. No, keep walking. Keep walking. And one of those things when the child just kind of stops there and just stands there. It's like, no, I'm going to shove you along. Keep walking. Let's go. Don't make me pick you up. It's going to be a lot worse if I pick you up. Keep walking. All right. We're outside. We're right outside my car. And say, get in the car. No, I'm not getting in the car. And just screams at me. You know what I did? All right, I didn't spank him. I smacked him right in the mouth. Said, you don't ever look me in the face and you scream at me. You don't ever do that. It's a true story. I'm not ashamed of it. By God, he will not scream in my face again. Again, it's a boundary. All right. Did he pick that behavior up and think it was okay at a different time? Possibly. Maybe the first time that ever happened, it wasn't stopped. I don't know. There's sometimes he's with his mom, and there's sometimes he's with me. His mom's a great mother. All right. Soft in a lot of ways. All right. And so, but those instances are incredibly important, I think. I think you have to set a boundary. I think if you allow your child to just do what he wants and just scream in your face or, run amok or whatever it is, I think you're wrong. You can't just let a child act that way. You can't. And I think without the corrected discipline, they only continue to act out. And I think it only gets worse at that point. And so I think it's a problem now with today is that we don't do enough discipline because we're afraid of it. I think we're in this weird state of saying, you should just talk to them. They have feelings too. Give them timeouts. Don't touch them. They have a safe space. You can't harm their bubble. No, fuck that. That's my kid. They get a bubble when I give them the bubble, okay? They get that bubble once they start understanding what boundaries are, and then they can act. It's okay to tell a kid not to touch them and stuff like that. You should teach a child they have boundaries and they have a bubble that other kids can't be in because you should have that. All right, that's part of us growing up. Your bubble, as soon as someone gets into it, it becomes uncomfortable, and that's a real thing. That's why if you really want to get across to somebody really well, you really just get into their bubble. You have to get real close. And so there's so many different things that you can do to express that. But I think you're doing yourself and everyone else a disservice if you do not discipline your child the right way. All right. I think the lack of discipline is ruining what we have in the education system and in our country, because I think that's where you're getting people acting however the hell they want. I think there's a lot of confusion with kids because they are getting taught that you can't be touched or do whatever, or they can do whatever they want. And then all of a sudden they go to a place with the rules and structure, and it's easy to rebel against that because they don't know any better. And that's the other thing is rebellion is incredibly big with a lot of, teenagers and pre-angst children and whatnot, or angsty children. Preteen angsty children is what I meant to say. It's hard to parent a child. Nobody said it was easy. There's no good book on it because every child is different. But this idea that you can't actually discipline your child, I think is wrong. Okay, I think you should be able to spank your kids. There's a difference between a wooden, paddle. Okay, and back in the day, they said that they put holes in it because where the holes were the welts would develop. Okay, and so there's a difference between a paddle like that, a swat on the ass, or a swat in the mouth to show that you're serious about what you're talking about. Because during those moments, you're breaking those boundaries and you're breaking those bubbles that we teach them that are important. It's like my kid used to walk in all the time whenever you go into the bathroom. and didn't understand the importance of the privacy of a bathroom until a little bit as he got older or whatnot. Because you got to think, whenever you're potty training a child, you're there with them or you're cheering them on, and, or the door's open a lot in some cases, and they want privacy because a lot of times they'll go poop in the corner or go hide and poop or whatever, because whether they're embarrassed or whatever, but that's a private act, okay? But then once they start preschool or kindergarten or in school and whatnot, they learn how important privacy is in your own, and how important it is to have that bit of a bubble or that time to yourself. You have to understand that popping that bubble every now and then shows a lot. All right, it makes them uncomfortable. It's a way to show discipline. So there's ways to do it. And I guess I should say, whenever I talk about a spank or a swat on the butt, or whenever I pop my child in the mouth, I'm not punching them. You aren't doing it hard. You're making impact and you're showing there's force. All right, I smacked my son in the mouth whenever he screamed in my face. I didn't do it hard. It was one of those where you just knew the hand was there. Because the child knows you're a lot stronger than them. They know you're bigger. They've seen you lift things. They've seen you lift them. They know that you're strong. You don't put strength behind it. You're not hitting them hard enough to give them a fat lip. You're not hitting them so that they bleed. If you do that, that's abuse. That's abuse. So I guess I should have probably led with that pretty early in this conversation. So you all didn't think I'm just punching my child or beating the shit out of them, okay? The part of discipline is less about the force that's made and more about the impact that is made. The impact is about breaking that barrier and swatting them on the butt to show them you're serious. Now, if it's still not working, then you do it harder at that point, or you get the belt, hopefully only one time. If you're doing it every time, then you're doing it wrong. When I swatted my son in the mouth, it was less than what I would do if I swatted him on the butt. 100% less. But he knew that I was serious about how bad that was. It was disrespectful. You teach respect, all right? You don't condone them acting however they want. That's part of discipline. You can't, by inaction is condoning whatever action they're doing. Okay, and by that I mean, if you do nothing when they're acting out and acting ridiculous, it means that what they're doing isn't wrong, and they're going to do it again, and they're going to replicate that act. Don't allow that to happen. You have to be better than that. All right? So should you spank your kids? Absolutely you should, in the right circumstance. Disciplining a child is incredibly important. All right? We're rearing children into life. Where we're at now, I think a lot of kids probably should have been spanked more. Look at me. I'm fine. If you didn't catch that, that was a joke, because anybody that said that they were spanked, you know what? I'm not even going to explain it. I'm not going to do it. If you don't get it, then whatever. That was a joke, by the way. But there is a difference between discipline and abuse. And I think finding that line is important. I think you can't just beat a kid just to beat a kid. You don't just spank them every time they're wrong or they do something wrong. All right? There's a difference, okay? Discipline your children and stop letting them do what the hell they want. And don't worry, because I now have a new outro that tells you to follow me. But if you didn't know, please leave a comment and subscribe whenever you can. Because this is Evan with Lemons with Clemens.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Lemons with Clemens. If you want to hear more, be sure to like and subscribe on Facebook and YouTube.